Okay, this video is the quick version of our Zoom training. I'm just going to touch on a couple of really critical points here. So if you have never logged into Zoom before, everyone at the college has an account. So you just come to sign in and you come down here and choose sign in with single sign on, and then you're going to put Gettysburg, and then you're going to click continue. And then you use your regular username and password to get in at that point. Once you're in, you really could just get going by clicking schedule a meeting or host a meeting. If I clicked host a meeting, now I have already downloaded the Zoom application, so it's just telling me, my computer's telling me it's going to launch an application. If you hadn't already downloaded it, you would instead get a box of some sort that said you need to download Zoom, and it would start that process for you. So you would do whatever you do within your own operating system or computer to find your downloads and launch the application. Some computers, the installer will just launch anyway. You won't have to do anything, but you may need to come up. For instance, I'm in Firefox, so I could come up here to my download button here, or I could go to the folder where I know all my downloads are saved to, and get the Zoom installer started. And there's no choices you're going to need to make. You're just going to need to spin up that installer. Once you've actually created once you've actually installed the software, in this case, I'm just clicking on that because I already have, it's going to bring up the full Zoom environment, and it's going to ask you if you want to join with your computer audio. If you have never used Zoom before, test your speaker and microphone first, but otherwise you're just going to join with that. There are a variety of buttons down here, and the most important is knowing how to get the buttons, which is just sliding your mouse over the bottom part of the page. And then you can stop your video, and if that's the case, in my case, I've placed a still image up there for myself. If you haven't done that, which I'll show you in a second, you'll instead just have your name up there. I can mute myself. I'm muted in Zoom. Nobody's there. I mean, you can still hear me, but Zoom. Then I'm going to get my camera back on. I have some video options here. I can go in and change my video settings from here, although I'm going to show you in just a second back on the website how to establish some basic settings that you're going to need just from here on out. This would list all the participants. Right now it's only me, and I have some, scooch that in just a little more so it fits inside my recording video. I would have everyone listed, and I would have the ability to mute them, do a few other things. I could share my screen, which allows me to get my screen. That's going to get a little meta there to have a Screencast-O-Matic recording of a Zoom recording of a screencast of my doing both those things. So I'm actually not going to click it right now, but I could just do my entire show all windows, like my whole screen. This is my whole screen. This is every window on my screen. And then I can pick all the various other things that I have currently going on my computer right now. I'm actually not going to do any of those, but just showing you that that's what Share does, is show your screen. When I click on More, I have the ability to pull up the chat window, which allows me to send chat messages or have people send chat messages to you. I can also stop my recording, pause it. I can do that up here. Also, I can create a poll, which is just type in a question, the students answer it, or I can create breakout rooms that automatically divides all my students up into various groups, or gives me the option to assign them into groups. You can check other videos out for that kind of detail. All right, so that went away. There we go. That's basically how you use Zoom. And then when you're done, you click End Meeting for All. And I'm just going to close that. But I'm back inside that Zoom website that we started with way back at the very beginning, because I want to show you a few settings that will make your life easier as you use Zoom. If you set them here, you won't have to reset them every time you do a meeting. I'm going to start by going to my account, and there's certain things, there's all sorts of settings, and we're going to go down through this. This reminds me if just in case I forget or I need to copy it and send it to somebody, this is the link that you'll want to give students or anyone else who's going to be in your Zoom meeting. You can copy that and then tell them what time to show up. I'll send that to them in an email. You can schedule a meeting, and in that case it will generate some text that you can copy and paste into an email also. But really, this is the important part of what to give students. You can ignore all of that, all of this you can ignore, all of this, in fact, all of this you can ignore, except this is how you would log out if you needed to log out. Here in the meetings, I could schedule a new meeting. I could look at any previous meetings that I've had. I can go to my personal meeting room. Again, here's my link again so that I can copy it. And it's telling me some settings that I have in my personal meeting room. If I want to copy, and you know how I talked about how you can just copy and paste that, but you can also click copy invitation, and that gets you more information than that. It also gives you the phone number information for people who don't have internet access but do have phone access. So you copy and paste into an email. So that's an option too. I am not going to change or edit any of these meetings right now. I am instead just going to come down here to settings. And now, this is the important part. Do you want to have a waiting room? That is, students can't come into your class until you'll see a thing that pops up on your screen that says you have people in your waiting room. Do you want to let them in? And you say yes. The advantage of a waiting room is that it makes it easier to be sure you're only letting your own students in. If you have a really large class, this might be hard because you might not know all their names off the top of your head. So I would suggest at the start of the semester, turn off your waiting room. And then, if you see any issues with students coming into the class who shouldn't be in the class, you can always come back here to your settings and turn that back on again. Blue means it's on, gray means it's off. Do you want to require a password when you schedule a meeting? Just leave it off for now, because you can do that in an individual meeting if you decide you want to. Do you want to require a password for instant meetings? That's when you just click host a meeting. Again, I would leave that off for now. See if you have any problems with people trying to Zoom bomb or otherwise get into your course site when you don't, your Zoom site when you don't want them to. Most of the rest of this we're just all ignoring. When you use the schedule meeting, which you really don't have to do, you can always just tell your students what your meeting location is and just click host a meeting when you're ready. But if you did schedule them, do you want the video on as soon as you've turned it on? I do that. But at participants, I tend to not have my students' video on, and then I ask them if they choose to, they can turn their video on. Telephone and computer audio, leave that like it should be. Join before host, I have that turned off. I don't want anybody coming in until I've come in. I do have a personal meeting ID. You're going to want to make sure that's enabled. It should be, and then I have mine set every time I schedule a meeting. It just uses my personal ID. It doesn't use some other ID. If you want to generate a new ID every single time you schedule, click, turn that off. I think it's easier to leave it at the personal ID. And definitely for instant meetings also. Mute participants upon entry. I always do that so that there's not a whole bunch of people talking and I can't follow what's going on. This way, when they come in, they're muted, but then they can unmute themselves. Chat should be on. Private chat allows your students to chat with each other without you ever seeing it. And I think it's probably best to go ahead and turn that off unless there is some valid pedagogical reason to have that on. I save the chats as a record. Maybe you can do that. That way, if you have some questions you need to return to, doesn't really matter. A lot of the rest of this I'm just ignoring. Allow to have co-host, that's good. Polling is good. Always show meeting control bar, should be blue. Show Zoom windows during screen share, yes, because you want to still see who's there and stuff. Screen sharing, by default it's going to be set to host only, but if you want your students to be able to share their screens, you can either change it to all participants or actually in the Zoom session you can give someone permission to share. Annotation, allow host and participants to use annotation tools to add information to shared screens. I think by default that's on whiteboard. Whiteboard's nice. It's just a white screen you can write on if you have some way to write besides just your mouse, which is hard. All of these are on by default, so you can just leave them like they are. You probably don't want the participants to rename themselves because then you won't know who they are, but that's up to you. You definitely want breakout rooms available. Closed captioning is a good idea if you're doing recordings of your meetings and saving those. Virtual background, you do want to turn that on in case you want to use a virtual background. A lot of this just left as the default. There's nothing particularly important there. This is getting emails. Do you want an email when your recorded video is available? Do you want to know if students join the meeting? I turn mine off so they can't join before, but I'll still get an email. Something canceled. These are all just defaults and you can leave them alone. You can leave these things alone. Yeah. So generally, all of that, those are the basic settings, but the important settings are to turn on the waiting room, turn off password, have your video on. That's pretty important. Enable personal meeting ID and use it when scheduling and starting a meeting. Really, if you've got those things down, you're in good shape. So those are all these various settings. If you do record your meetings, they'll be showing up here in this website. Here's all the meetings that I've recorded lately. This is so if you have students who couldn't attend class, you can always post it to your Moodle site. And that's really the short version of how to use Zoom. There are other videos that can assist you in the more detailed aspects of using Zoom, located both in our guide to our online teaching and learning site, as well as Zoom itself has some information, some support to learn how to use it. And you can always just Google how to use Zoom, because once you've logged in as yourself, everything in our Zoom is just like everybody else's Zoom in the world, and there's a ton of stuff out there about Zoom. But the Zoom video tutorials that are part of the Zoom Help Center are all really good, so that is worth taking a look at. All right, good luck with Zoom.